Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be my summer TBR. Now, to be honest, I'm so excited about this summer. I'm so excited about my summer TBR because I feel like I am trying to channel like summer break this summer. Like, yes, I'm still working, but in my head, I'm on summer vacation like I was in school. And I just want to like play video games, read books, hang out with my friends, but like majority don't even leave my house, and I could not be more excited about it. Needless to say, I'm so excited about my TBR for this summer. But before we dive into the books themselves, first a word from this video's partner, which is Rosetta Stone. I'm so pumped to be working with Rosetta Stone this video because again, summer break is upon us and I know many of us like to travel during the summer months. So Rosetta Stone is the perfect companion for that, as they are one of the most well-known and premier language learning services out there. But if you're not familiar and have not heard of the iconic Rosetta Stone, they are an interactive and comprehensive way to learn over 25 different languages. And their software is available at home, but also on the go with their app, ensuring that learning the language of your choice is available to you at your fingertips at any time, which is amazing. And also makes it so much easier to fit into your schedule and your day, especially if you're on the go. Rosetta Stone uses a dynamic immersion approach built by experts, pairing pictures with audio from native speakers, creating an engaging and unique learning experience that helps so much with retention. They also have a really cool technology called a True Accent, which really helps you with pronunciation, and you can actually get a clear understanding of how you're actually supposed to say and speak whatever words or sentences you're learning to ensure that you sound like a local. As I said, Rosetta Stone is now 100% accessible via their app, meaning that you can take your lessons on the go, which is amazing. Many of their lessons are also as short as 10 minutes, making it again super easy to fit in your schedule and your lifestyle no matter where you are. Again, with Rosetta Stone, it goes beyond memorization with their dynamic approach and allows you to speak confidently no matter where you are with their app. So again, I'll have a link down below if y'all want to learn more. A big shout out again to them for sponsoring this video, but without further ado, let's go ahead and dive back into the book. So I'm not gonna lie, in terms of my TBR for the season, I got a lot of chunky books, but a good mix of fantasy, as I always have, but also some other genres. I'm particularly interested in getting back more into sci-fi. I've recently read some really fantastic sci-fi books, so I want to continue that momentum, but let's talk about them. Finally. So the first book that's on my list is the Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. This is Brandon Sanderson's secret project number 2. I don't know anything about this book outside of the title and the cover, and now that I have like the physically finished hard copy in my hand, which I'm excited to have because I read Tress via ebook, so I never actually got to experience the beautiful full color illustrations that were present in the limited edition version I also bought. Because I waited a little bit, I feel like I can have a totally different experience with Secret Project number 2. I'm so excited about it. I've honestly stayed away from all reviews, any perspectives. Again, I don't know the synopsis outside of it seems like some type of wizard in medieval England, which as a setup, I love. But I'm looking forward to getting to this book too. I feel like it's going to be really fun and charming and playful, but again, I'm making assumptions here. The next book that's on my TBR is Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. It would not be an action-packed reading summer if I didn't check out more of the Expanse series. I read the 5th book earlier this year and loved it, flew through it, and I just feel like the Expanse series is so much fun and constantly takes me by surprise. It's high octane and just so plot forward. Like, space operas and summer go hand in hand. I don't care what anyone says. Obviously, I talk about this series almost ad nauseum on my channel, but the Expanse series is a space opera tale following a large cast of characters, but primarily James Holden, who is a ship captain, and in the first book, he and his crew basically stumble upon this very strange piece of technology which upends the system that he lives in completely. The setting of this book is kind of near future. Humanity has grown beyond the reaches of Earth, and now we have governments on Mars and the Moon, as well as on a series of space stations called the Belt. They all have a lot of distrust and dislike of each other, meaning the political landscape is very contentious, and this piece of technology found in book 1 sort of lights everything on fire. But again, the overall plot continues to expand in so many different directions and balloons in such satisfyingly entertaining ways throughout the course of the series. I'm on book 6. I like James Holden, I love all the characters, and I'm also just so impressed how the author is able to keep this series feeling so fresh and not repetitive, because I feel like it really could have easily fallen into that trap, but not yet. Next up, I want to read The Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. This is the first book to the Rhaenyra Revelations series. I obviously have been reading and loving the Legends of the First Empire series by Michael J. Sullivan, which is a ancient set fantasy series set in this world. So once I finish that up, I want to start this very beloved series following a very dynamic duo and just see what I think. I've technically read this book, but I read it so long ago, maybe 9 years ago at this point. I remember liking it but not loving it, but I have a feeling my opinion could change. I'm hoping it will change. I know I love Michael J. Sullivan's writing, and I also think with the context of this happening in the same world as the Legends of the First Empire series, I just think something's, gonna click different inside my head this time around. But this follows our two main characters, Royce, who is a talented thief, and a mercenary named Hadrian. They are partners in crime, and they're basically hired to do a variety of different jobs. At the beginning of this book, they're hired to steal a sword, which seems simple enough until it rapidly turns into a very complicated situation. And I think that is kind of like the start of the series, again, following these two very beloved characters. I'm curious about this. I'm hoping I love it. I just want an adventure and a good time, and I feel like this is going to deliver that. Next up, I have The Story of a New Name by Elena Ferrante. This is book 2 to the Neapolitan novel series, the first one being My Brilliant Friend, which I read last summer and loved. This is currently on my June TBR. Honestly, My Brilliant Friend is one of the best books I've simply ever read, so I knew I wanted to continue this series over the course of this year. I'm hoping to actually maybe finish or at least read two more books before the end of 2023. But the Neapolitan novel series follows Lila and Elena, and throughout the entire series we watch their life. In My Brilliant Friend, we're introduced to them as very young children as they first become friends through their kind of early adolescence, through high school, and The Story of a New Name is going to be following them in kind of the next chapter of their life as young women. The name of the first book is incredibly clever because not only is this series documenting a very dynamic female friendship in the 50s in Naples and Italy, but both the girls are also geniuses, and you also see how their life paths take very different directions, with one girl having access to education and the other not. I'm really curious to see how the story is going to continue to progress. Elena Ferrante's writing is addictive, and how intense the relationships are within Elena Ferrante's world. It's just, it's so compelling and so hard to put down once you pick it up. It's also a difficult read for a variety of reasons, but nevertheless, I want to get to this book this summer. It just feels appropriate to read during the summertime, and I also know I'm going to love it. Next up, I also have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, another book that is gracing my current month's TBR, but this is R.F. Kuang's newest release, and obviously as a stan of this author, I read all of the books that she puts out, but this is this author's first foray into like lit fic, but I would say a lot of her fantasy books also lean in a literary direction, but but say what you will about genre tags. In the story, we're following our main character, June, and June, alongside her classmate Athena, were supposed to be rising stars in the literary world. But where Athena turned out to be a literary darling, June's book isn't even getting a paperback release. She's just not been well received. However, though, at the beginning of this book, June witnesses a tragic accident resulting in Athena's passing, but she also was the only one kind of to see it, and also ended up with Athena's manuscript for her next book, which she takes and then publishes under a racially ambiguous name, basically stealing Athena's book, stealing in a lot of ways also her racial identity, and she gets a lot of praise. And this book is R.F. Kuang's not only deep criticism of the publishing world, but this obviously is kind of a dark satire, very cutting style story that I think is going to be a ride to read from beginning to end. I've heard really interesting things about this book. I'm personally very, very curious about it. I feel like it's going to be a lot to discuss. And for that, I'm very intrigued by it all. And again, it's just cool to have a more fantasy-leaning author veer into the literary fiction space, so I'm really looking forward to this. Next up shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but I also have Age of Death by Michael J. Sullivan, and we can honestly add book 6 of the Legends of the First Empire series on here as well. I want to wrap it up. I have loved the journey of reading this, and honestly, it feels like such a summertime series to me too. It's just so pastoral, and the landscapes and the traditional elements of the story that feels like classic fantasy just land so well for me, and it just is such a joy to read. But Age of Death by Michael J. Sullivan is the 5th book to this particular series, and I'm just obsessed with the whole thing. But the Legends of the First Empire series is a series set in an ancient civilization. It's a classic setup of humans versus elves versus dwarves. And essentially at the beginning of book 1, humans worship elves as gods until accidentally killing one, kind of upending not only their religion, but also the social structure of the time. From there, we watch humanity as they quickly progress in society, check out and experiment with different political systems, invent things, and also we see the progression of a war and conflict with the elves themselves. What I also love about this series is the timeline itself. The progression of the plot is very like methodical. We follow a large cast of characters over a significant amount of time, so you feel very connected to everyone. It also leans on some wonderful fantasy tropes, from great quests to like fantastic and well-written battle scenes. It just really knows when to speed things up and to slow things back down again. Also, it's kind of divided into 2 trilogies. It is a 6-book series, but kind of with 2 acts, if you will. I'm definitely in the end game, and again, I want to read books 5 and 6. I just love it so much. It's so good. Everything about it. A delight, you know? Next up, I have The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This is Mark Lawrence's first book to a new series. And as I've said before, the synopsis of this is so vague, but the setup of it appears to be something I could really, really love. I feel like this is going to be a slow burn of a novel, possibly like very beautiful and lyrical, which I wouldn't necessarily anticipate from Mark Lawrence, but I'm excited about it. Basically, the synopsis goes, there are 2 characters that have kind of a fated meeting, and they're gonna go on a journey together in this like magical, never-ending library. First is a boy who's lived his whole life trapped in this very library, and the second is a girl who spent her early days in a small settlement in the dust where the nightmare stalks and no one goes. Again, they have a meeting, things change forever. I can't wait to read this. I just feel like this is going to be transportive and magical and enchanting. All of the words you want from a new fantasy release. I'm also excited to read my first Mark Lawrence book. I've never read a book by him before, so I'm just curious to see what I think. I don't think his like Prince of Thorns series is for me, but this, and I think his Red Sister series very well could be. Next up, I have another sci-fi pick, because as I said, I'm on another sci-fi kick, if you will, and that is Vegabonds by Hao Jingfeng, and this is translated by Ken Liu. And this book just sounds so intense, and I also feel like diplomacy and culture and communication is going to be a large part of the plot of this, and I just loved A Memory Called Empire so much, and I just feel like sci-fi books really explore a lot of nuances in culture in a way that I just really resonate with. The synopsis is broken up in 3 different time periods. First, 2096, where Mars kind of breaks away from Earth, forming its own government and also beginning the Cold War and the Iron Curtain, which will then persist for well over 100 years. Fast forward to 2196, 6 individuals, including the Council of Mars's granddaughter, are sent to Earth to live there for 5 years in hopes of creating an environment for reconciliation. Then the 5 years have passed, they all return back to Mars, having a hard time kind of feeling like they belong. Particularly the granddaughter of the leader of Mars is struggling with his vision for the future, which just sounds really complex, really, really interesting. And honestly, this also sells it for me. Vegabonds is a work of literary fiction that transcends genre. The author has created a novel of political intrigue and philosophical dissonance that speaks to a generation of readers who find themselves continually displaced within our current culture. I mean, doesn't that just sound riveting? I need to read it. I need to read it and then talk about it with everyone. The next book that's on my TBR is what appears to be a very strange literary fiction leaning psychological thriller book, and that is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. This book just sounds honestly very bizarre, and I have a close IRL friend who's read this and confirmed it, but it also sounds so interesting. This follows our main character, Bodhi, who's like a successful podcaster and like beloved internet figure, but her adolescence was marred with a lot of trauma. Or specifically, Bodhi went to a boarding school where her roommate was actually murdered during her senior year, and the person who was convicted for this crime, the athletic trainer on the campus, it's highly debated if he actually did it. Many years have passed since this incident, and Bodhi hasn't really revisited this at all until one day she's basically invited back on campus to teach a course. Once she arrives, she's not only confronted with a lot of memories, but she also begins to fall down the rabbit hole of the case itself. Again, this book is said to go in some very, very wild directions. I also think the concept of possibly having like a true crime podcast element to this possibly sounds really interesting, given that our main character was so close to the crime itself. I don't know. I feel like this is like a love it or hate it kind of book, but I also feel like it'll be very propulsive once I get started. And I feel like this is my thriller leaning book for the season. And I feel like you can't have a summer TBR without one thriller-esque story. Speaking of weird thrilling novels, the next book that's on my TBR is Insurrection, which is Rosewater Book 2 by Tad Thompson. Rosewater, which I read last summer, was by far one of the most unique and strange sci-fi reading experiences of my entire life. It was another sci-fi book that kind of has this political spy diplomacy element to it, which clearly I have a soft spot for, but also like so many elements of the plot was just nothing I've ever encountered before. The Rosewater series is basically set on Earth, but everything that we know about Earth has completely changed since a very strange alien thing arrived and grew on Earth, kind of creating this egg-like membrane thing. Surrounding this sort of egg-like thing, a community was created, particularly because this egg can kind of provide instantaneous healing, and also has spread a type of magical ability where people have telekinetic powers. However, though, at the beginning of this book, we run into our main character who begins to realize that the people who have these telekinetic powers, which he himself has, are beginning to disappear and die off. This book is structurally written out of order completely, adding to the political thriller element to it. And our main character is also very much involved with the government, but also has a criminal past. So it's a very complex and interesting story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. I truly could say, in my heart of hearts, I had no idea where the first book, Rosewater, was going. So my expectation in terms of being surprised and thrilled in book 2 are very, very high. But apparently this is a masterful follow-up to the award-winning Rosewater, and I have a lot of faith in this author as I really enjoy just a lot of his sci-fi works. I've read many of them, so this is on my TBR for the summer. I feel like this will be a perfect explosive read to entertain me. Next up, I want to start the reread process of another favorite series I haven't revisited in a long time. In May, I reread all of Percy Jackson, and it was honestly just such a blast, and it absolutely like stood the test of time for me. So I wanted to challenge myself to start at least another series I love so much and just revisit it, and that is going to be the Thief series by Megan Wallen Turner. I love this series, and I have full faith and expectation it's going to maintain its 5 out of 5 star rating from me. But again, there's only one way to find out. But the Queen's Thief series by Megan Wallen Turner is so clever, so much fun. It's full of so many characters you will truly love so much. But the first book, The Thief, introduces us to our main character, who is, you guessed it, a very, very talented thief. And you find him in jail, and he's basically offered an opportunity to escape jail if he goes on a quest to retrieve this very powerful, like, ancient object. This world that Megan Wallen Turner creates is very much inspired by ancient Greece, with different kingdoms kind of matching different city-states that existed during this time period. And another element of the story that's also very inspired by ancient Greece is like the mythos and the gods, as well as the storytelling element of this time period. This is a quest-based tale. We follow our main character, the thief, going on this quest, making fun of everyone and anyone around him, but also we see them sharing stories by the fireside, and it's such an immersive experience. This book is so clever and sets up the rest of the series perfectly. It's definitely like a slower beginning, but it's a very methodical thing that Megan Wallen Turner does in terms of the entire experience of this world, and I just loved it. I just truly adore this series so much, and it just felt like the right time to re-encounter it again. And the last book that's on my TBR is a book I've been meaning to get to for months, and it also, like, aesthetically speaking, it feels like summer matches it the best in terms of seasonality, and that is Child of the Prophecy by Juliette Marillier, the third book to the Daughter of the Forest series. I initially thought this series was a trilogy, but I believe it actually has 6 books. But nonetheless, I love this series so much. The Daughter of the Forest series is like cottagecore fantasy to a T. In the first book, we're introduced to the Seven Waters Kingdom and are also introduced to our main character, Sorsa, who is the youngest child and only daughter to the Seven Waters clan. At the beginning of the story, we watch Sorsa as she sort of runs wild. She loves nature. She loves medicine. She is also learned, which is very rare for the time and the area in which she lives. However, though, at the beginning of this book, her father remarries a woman, and when she arrives, she basically passes a curse not only on her father, but all of her brothers, turning them into swans and also taking her voice. From there, we follow our main character as she sets out on a journey to try to save those she loves most. She must traverse dangerous lands and also trust people that she has been told her entire life are her enemies. It's complicated, but also beautifully written, both in the style of the writing, but also the story itself will just like burrow into your heart. It does have quite a few trigger warnings, which I do want to mention, but each subsequent book since the first one basically follows the next generation of a child from this family going out on some type of quest. In this quest, there's lots of self-discovery, lots of coming into their own. There usually is some type of romantic element to it, but all of it is just a delightful package, great writing, and just, it's such a well-balanced story, especially if you want something that has like hard-hitting fantasy and romance. This is a series for you. I just feel like the combination is top-notch and it's beautifully done, and the nature scenes and the environments that Juliette Merlier is able to make, the lushness of the landscapes just scream summer. Alrighty guys, that is my summer TBR. Please let me know down below some books you hope to get to this season, as I would love to know. Again, big shout out to this video's sponsor, which is Rosetta Stone, which I will also have more information about in the description. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!